The current federal government shutdown, triggered by a congressional impasse over funding, marks a significant and dangerous evolution in partisan conflict. Traditionally, shutdowns were high stakes, but ultimately temporary lapses in appropriations, resulting in furloughs that were later remedied with guaranteed back pay. The core issue of the latest standoff, however, transcends mere funding levels. It is a fundamental struggle over the composition and purpose of the executive branch itself. Under the current administration, the shutdown is being actively weaponized as a tool for permanent administrative change. Directives from the Office of Management and Budget, OMB, instructed agencies to prepare for mass firings via reductions in force, RIFs, targeting agencies deemed misaligned with the president's agenda, pejoratively termed Democrat agencies. Furthermore, federal resources are being mobilized for partisan attack, with official agency websites and employee out-of-office messages altered to explicitly blame opposition lawmakers for the impasse, raising immediate and serious legal questions about the use of taxpayer-funded government property for political propaganda. This shift transforms the shutdown from a legislative failure into an executive power play designed to dismantle parts of the civil service permanently and punish political opponents, reasons, and underlying causes. The escalation is driven by a convergence of ideological and tactical motives. The primary reason is the long-term ideological goal, often aligned with policy blueprints like Project 2025, to aggressively deconstruct the administrative state. The shutdown is no longer seen as a failure to govern, but as an opportunity to achieve this goal by eliminating entire programs and departments through RIFs, bypassing the lengthy legislative process required for traditional congressional abolishment. This strategy is driven by the view that many regulatory and social agencies constitute a deep state hostile to conservative priorities. Secondly, the move is rooted in punitive and transactional politics. By threatening permanent job losses, likely numbering in the thousands, and targeting the favorite projects and priorities of Democrats, such as climate initiatives or ACA subsidies, the administration seeks to inflict maximum pain and political pressure on its rivals. Federal workers, often perceived as a Democratic constituency, are utilized as political leverage, raising the human and economic cost of the stalemate to an unprecedented level. This extreme polarization prioritizes victory and humiliation over compromise, solidifying the use of the government's very structure as a bargaining chip. Consequences and impact. The immediate consequences of this escalation are severe, both institutionally and economically. First, the erosion of the nonpartisan civil service is perhaps the most damaging long-term effect. The threat of rifts during a funding lapse breaks with decades of civil service precedent and undermines the institutional morale and political independence of federal employees. By turning civil servants into political pawns, the administration discourages qualified experts from public service, replacing institutional knowledge and merit-based governance with political loyalty. This jeopardizes the government's capacity to carry out complex, non-political functions effectively. Second, the weaponization of official federal communication sets a dangerous precedent, with ethics watchdogs and federal unions filing lawsuits alleging violations of the Hatch Act and the Anti-Lobbying Act. Using government websites and resources to publish partisan political messages blurs the line between the executive branch as an impartial administrator of law and as a campaign extension, profoundly damaging public trust in the impartiality of federal agencies. Economically, the shutdown impact is magnified. While temporary furloughs cause immediate wage loss and economic uncertainty, the threat of permanent layoffs injects volatility into the national job market and housing sectors, as seen with potential halts on FEMA flood insurance approvals. Delayed government services, from small business loans to environmental permits, slow economic activity, costing the economy billions and creating a drag on investor and consumer confidence. Prediction and potential solutions. Prediction. Given the success of the current high-leverage, high-pain approach in generating pressure, this form of weaponized shutdown is likely to become the new baseline for future budget negotiations. Shutdowns will likely be shorter but more frequent and intensely volatile, transforming into annual administrative battles focused less on funding amounts and more on the systemic elimination of entire governmental functions and regulatory powers. Future impasses will be less about the budget ceiling and more about the structural makeup of the state. Potential solutions. Addressing this structural crisis requires insulating the operations of the government from political brinkmanship. Civil service reforms. Congress must strengthen legal protections against reductions in force, RIFs, to explicitly prohibit their initiation during a shutdown or as a punitive political measure. This would help restore the nonpartisan integrity of the federal workforce. Automatic continuing resolutions, CRs. Congress could pass standing legislation mandating an automatic short-term continuing resolution, CR, that funds the government at current levels if new appropriations bills are not signed by the deadline. This mechanism, known as a clean CR, would defang the political utility of a shutdown and force lawmakers to negotiate without the threat of government closure. Hatch Act enforcement. Independent government ethics bodies must be empowered and adequately funded to swiftly and decisively investigate and penalize violations involving the partisan use of federal resources, reinforcing the critical barrier between government administration and political campaigning. Ultimately, while legislative fixes can mitigate the damage, only a renewed bipartisan commitment to de-escalate budget politics and respect the fundamental, nonpartisan nature of the federal bureaucracy can truly prevent future weaponized shutdowns.